really it's something that we have to kind of break down and get away from. But now what you hear from the trans advocates and from the trans agenda is that, well, if a boy partakes in the artificial construct of femininity, then that means that he actually is a girl. And so they actually are they're giving more weight to the so-called social construct than anyone ever did before. And so that's just the incoherence of the view, where they're holding these different ideas that don't really work together. And all you have to do is start pulling at that thread a little bit, and it all just kind of collapses.
Why the big push? I mean, why is it such a stark issue right now that so many people get so vitriolic about? I mean, seeing the reaction from these people who you were on the show with getting so absolutely angry. I mean, and you talked about on your show about these people's intentions, and you weren't entirely sure if these people had the best intentions with what they were doing. Do you think that most of these people who believe this have good intentions and they're trying to help the world and make it into this more progressive place where people can be free to be whatever gender they want? Or do you think that it is for more of the selfish, egotistical intentions where this is something to make themselves feel good?
Yeah, no, I think they have evil intentions for sure. I don't think that there are good intentions here at all. I also don't believe that most of the people who claim to believe this actually do, which is why they can't even begin to defend it. I mean, I'm sorry, I just don't believe that there might be a very small minority of people who are, mentally ill and just basically crazy and really do think that, for example, men can give birth. But I think that portion of people is very, very, very small. There's a much greater portion that are actually pushing these ideas, and I don't think they really believe it, and I do think that it's evil intentions. And when I say evil intentions, by the way, I'm not talking about from like these are super villain comic book characters where in their own heads they're telling themselves, oh, I'm evil, and so I want to do an evil thing. That's not how evil people operate in the real world. So when I say evil intentions, what I really mean are selfish intentions, where you're worried about yourself and you don't really care about the cause. So I talked about, we talked about Dr. Phil. And a lot of this, part of this conversation was cut, and I think a lot of that was just for time to cut a lot of stuff. But we talked quite a bit about the problem of girls being sexually assaulted in the bathroom, and also, this whole portion was covered in the program. We also talked about women being raped in prisons by males who were put into female prisons. This is a big problem that's happening. And I brought this up to the other side, and there's no other way to put it than they just don't care. They just don't. For them, that is a cost worth paying, as long as they get their way ideologically and they get to feel better about it. And I don't know how else to describe that other than evil. I mean, if you're okay with girls getting raped in a bathroom or a woman being locked in a prison cell with a male sex offender, if you're okay with that, it's just not possible to have good intentions and it result in that.
Yeah, it's one thing to be ignorant. It's one thing to be ignorant and not know the information about what's going on. It's a whole nother thing to see what's happening in front of you and say, my agenda is greater than these people's lives. That's what it really boils down to.
Yeah, and I think we got into a healthy debate on the show over that use of the word evil and whether or not that pertains to people like that. Because typically, I used to be a former leftist and I'm also a woman. So I tend to be the more compassionate out of the two of us when it comes to our show. And I tend to think that the people on the ground here that are pushing this transgender ideology do not have evil intentions, or in many ways, like Will would say, are ignorant to what their ideology and what their push for that ideology truly means in the real world. But I'm curious, what else got cut from your interview? Because if I had seen the parts where you talked about women being abused and these women in prisons, I think that might have influenced the way that I looked at the two people you were talking to.
Yeah, there was a lot. It was mainly
a trade caravan. This supplies Troy with gold. We can put a stop to that.
By the way, when I say things are cut, I'm not accusing Dr. Phil's people of doing it for ideological reasons. Actually, I think I kind of went into it expecting that I didn't know what was going to happen, but I found them to be quite fair, and I was impressed by that. But like I said, things just it's a long conversation to cut things off because they stuff in a lot of commercials. It was a lot of that about the sexual assault. And then there was also an exchange that I had with the mother at the end, who was raising a quote-unquote genderless child, where I asked her, would you, because she was bragging about the fact that she was going to let her child choose his own gender, and I I said, well, would you let him choose his own race also? And if not, why? And she said she wouldn't dignify that question with an answer. And they cut that part too, unfortunately. So, but it was mainly the things about sexual assault. And this is a conversation, of course, that's happened a lot. And I brought this up quite a bit to the other side. And they're not going to come out and just say it like this, but the reality is that they know that it happens. You can't deny that it happens. It is happening. And so it's just a cost, and they think it's worth paying. And also, even getting aside, I brought this point up too. I can't remember if I made it into the final cut or not. But we could talk about the women who are physically abused, and that happens. Much more common, though, you have women and girls who are really uncomfortable sharing these intimate spaces with men. And they're saying, even if nothing's happened to them physically, they just are really uncomfortable with it. They don't like it. They feel like their privacy is being infringed on. And what the other side tells us is that, well, they feel that way. On the other hand, we have a small minority of trans people, and it would make them feel bad if they're not allowed into these spaces, and their feelings take priority over yours.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with them telling me that I'm transphobic because I don't want to date a trans woman. It's like that makes absolutely no sense. You're putting those people's feelings above the feelings that have been constant in humanity for the last, 2,000 years, something like that. What has been the main strategy when you've seen this and talked to people? I'm curious if your clip and all of this have been able to change people's minds. Have you heard from people and said, I watched the clip on Dr. Phil, I watched you and your arguments, and it turned me to the other side, or at least opened up my mind to some sort of new way of thinking? Have you seen a lot of that?
I think when it comes to this issue, if you're talking to someone who's fully invested in it, like the people that I was on stage with, you're not going to change their mind in an instant in one conversation. I never had any illusion that there's anything that I could have said that would make the guy with the dress and the beard just say, you know what, you're right, never mind, and give up. That's not going to happen. All you could do with that is just maybe plant some seeds, hopefully, that will sprout into rational thought later in life. I think the people that we can really reach are just normal people who are not intensely ideological, who do understand the difference between males and females, but they find themselves suddenly living in a culture where everywhere they go, this other viewpoint is being shoved down their throats, and they're being berated constantly that they have to abandon everything that they thought they knew about biology and science and reality. And I think there are a lot of people like that who they know the truth, but they're starting to feel kind of confused and bewildered by it. And so I think those are people who you can pull back from the brink and you can say, no, you were right. You're right about this. And and that's okay. And this is the right view. And I think those are the people that we're hopefully reaching. It's sort of like you're giving people permission to just have common sense and be sane, I suppose.
Right, and I think where a lot of conservatives tend to jump in on the issue is when it starts to affect children, which we've been seeing now across the nation in public schools, children being taught about this gender theory and sexual